This is the part where life gets difficult. This is the part where we need some help to get the hard things done so that we can actually get from where we are to where we want to be. So we can actually make the contribution in the world to our team, to our organizations, to our families, to our friends and peers that we know that we should make. So, play to win. Winning isn't the only thing, or it isn't everything, it's the only thing. Love that quote. It's often wrongly attributed. It's actually Red Sanders that said that. How about this from Lance Armstrong? We've got to think about if playing to win, who are we playing against? And Armstrong has an interesting approach to it. He says there's a point in every race when a rider encounters his real opponent and understands that it's himself. Is that accurate for us? How does that work? You're in a bike race. How is the opponent you? Somebody pulls out ahead of you. Isn't he your opponent?
But do I have the desire to go chase him down?
Do I want to go through that pain right now to do it? And my ability to even make that decision is based on what? Did I go through the pain last week and last month and last year to prepare me for this moment where somebody's kicking my rear end and I got to dig down deep and either catch up and pass them or take second place? Right? How many of us want to take second place? No. That's like, it's like my son. I got a 9-year-old son, Jackson, and I travel a lot, and he called me on the phone one time, and I asked him, I said, Jackson, how'd your soccer game go? And he says, oh, Dad, we kissed our sisters. I said, what's that mean? He says, we tied, and it's just like kissing your sister. It's not losing, it's not winning, it's not that good, right? He's 9 years old, just a little guy. That's his perception of it, okay? Here's another perspective on who the competition is when we're trying to win, okay? One is ourselves, okay? Here's one from Swindle. It's us versus urgency. We already talked a little bit about this. He said, don't let the urgent take place of what's important in your life. Oh, the urgent will really fight, claw, and scream for attention. It will plead for our time and make us think that we've done the right thing by calming its nerves. But the tragedy of all this is that while you and I are putting out the fires of the urgent, never goes away, happens every single day, the important was again left in a holding pattern. And interestingly, the important is neither noisy nor demanding. Is the urgent demanding? Yeah. Oh yeah, it's demanding. It's right in our face. Unlike the urgent, it patiently and quietly waits for us to realize its significance. Another quote about us versus urgency. Urgency engulfs us, yet the most urgent task is not always the most important. The tyranny of the urgent lies in the distortion of priorities. One of the measures of effectiveness is the ability to distinguish the important from the urgent, to refuse to be tyrannized by the urgent. And many of us are tyrannized by the urgent. And a lot of it's our own creating, because we haven't planned, we haven't prepared, we're flying by the seat of our pants. How many of us cram for exams? Right? Doesn't that, what happens? You got a deadline, right? You've been put, was there any question when our exams are coming? We know, all along we know where they're coming. How come we don't work on them 2 or 3 weeks ahead of time? Because they're not urgent right then, right? Do they matter? Yeah, they matter, but we tend to cram. Because as soon as it gets urgent, then we're going to pay attention to it. All right, here's another one. This is from The War of Art. Not The Art of War, but The War of Art. Great book if you haven't read it. Short little paperback that's just amazing and so dang funny. Stephen Pressfield said, there's a secret that real writers know that wannabe writers don't. And the secret is this: it's not the writing part that's hard. What's hard is sitting down to write. What keeps us from sitting down is resistance. And this guy's a writer, and he's basically writing a book to teach people how to write, how to be successful professional writers. But when I read it, I'm not a writer, but it was one of the most powerful influences in helping me understand what it is that keeps me and others from getting her done. Resistance is it. And he actually defines resistance as if it has the characteristics of people. Very funny. You'll definitely relate to it. If you have a chance to read that, I highly recommend it. So it's us versus ourselves if we're trying to win. It's us versus the urgent if we're trying to win. And it's us versus resistance if we're trying to win. And resistance has a lot of faces. So to get past that, we got to put some mechanisms in place to help us to be able to win. some tools, if you will, that help us to be able to get past the enemy or get past the competition to win. One of the things that got to have a compelling mission and vision. Compelling, something that gets us going, gets us out of the bed in the morning to get after it. It's got to be something that we do that involves people in the process. Now, if you're just doing your own mission and vision, your own personal goals will, involve your own multiple personalities or whatever. But for the most part, that's your own little thing. But as soon as you lead a team, you don't do this work to people. You don't do this leadership work to people. You do it with them. And when you involve them in the process of identifying the goals and the strategies and the behaviors that we have to do to win, that's one of the mechanisms that makes them want to do it. Because whose idea is it? It's everyone's. And if it's the leader's idea, who's the smartest guy in the room and she knows it, then what are the people who are following that person thinking? Oh, that's their thing, right? Sometimes we want to make them fail just to make them look bad because they didn't listen to us. So people need to be heard in the process. We need to have these predictive measures to make sure that the achievement is on a regular basis. I don't want to find out in June that I wasn't ready to go to the beach. I want to be able to see week to week, day to day, I won today. How did I win today? I went to the gym, got my heart rate up over into the target zone for 30 minutes. I did resistance training for 20 minutes. I won today. Okay? I want to keep winning every single day. Those are the predictive measures. Scoreboards, something we haven't talked about that we'll talk about next, is a mechanism for winning. Writing down our goals and our commitments. We're not going to talk about that, but I think most of you know a goal not written is only a wish. So if you want to write your goals down, you'll be much more likely to actually get them done. The other thing is tell other people what your commitments are. If you tell somebody you're going to run a marathon, if you tell somebody you're going to get an A in a class, if you tell somebody what your intent is, because most of us have integrity, because most of us don't want to let our friends and peers and family members down, we tend to do a better job of getting after and accomplishing the things we've told other people we're committed to doing. So let people know. Don't hide it. Don't keep it a secret. Let people know what your intent is. Next thing you want to do is have a regular, what we call a rhythm of accountability. It's a regular time where you sit down and account to each other about whether or not you're doing the things that are necessary to win. So, James Ball in his book DNA Leadership said the primary stimulus for your actions is the mental tension you create in your mind when you become aware of the gap between where you are and where you want to be. Scoreboards is what lets you know that there's a gap. It creates that mental tension. You don't feel comfortable because what happens is if there's a gap between where you are and where you want to be, it tells you you're a loser. Now, how many in this room are losers? He's just kidding. He's not really. He feels like one now, but for the most part, I think all of you said we're winners, and I believe that. I think every human being is a winner. I think they have the capacity to win. I believe they want to win. They just don't have the mechanisms and the understanding to do it consistently. And so when you have a scoreboard that tells you you're a loser and you're a winner, that's a disconnect. It doesn't feel good. But I asked you guys earlier if you're winners, and I asked you, how did you know? There were lots of different responses, and I'm not sure any of them were accurate, right? Because I'd like some of you to prove that you're winning. Based on what objectives? How do you know? Right? So he says, once you become aware of this gap, you subconsciously and consciously begin to find ways to bridge it. So that's why we need the scoreboard, so we can become aware of the gap, and then subconsciously and consciously we start to close the gap. But we have to know what the gap is. So some rules for scoreboarding. Frankly, we want to do scoreboards in our lives and at work in particular like we do them in an athletic contest. Okay? Now, work with me on this one. How many of you have a job right now? How many of you, when you go to work, can tell at the end of a day or at the end of the week whether or not you were winning? Okay, a couple of you. Most of you are just working, right? It's like you're a football player and you're out running plays, you're running around in the field.